perhaps unsurprisingly, LayerZero and Kelp DAO are now fighting with each other. LayerZero said Kelp DAO chose a one-of-one DVN configuration. A hardened setup requires consensus across multiple independent DVNs. Kelp DAO countered LayerZero's own quick start and GitHub defaults point to the one-of-one structure, and 40% of LayerZero protocols use it. Third-party analysts are, to be honest, blaming largely more LayerZero here. So Zach Rines of Chainlink, OXNGMI, the Defiant and Dune analysis, and Euler have all said single verifier setups have always been centralized oracles. So I'm going to start right here before we get into some of the downstream economic implications of this, of what do people make of this specific attack, the sophistication, how the setup was done. Michael, I see you nodding. Do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's clearly a sophisticated attack. There's no doubt about that. I mean, yeah, changing the binaries, managing to carry out a DDoS at just the right time, and being able to, then trick the RPC nodes into essentially providing a false view of the world. It's all quite sophisticated, and clearly, I think, yeah, it looks like a nation state level. So I think the Lazarus attribution is probably correct. Yeah, I think there's all sorts of like issues here with sort of like risk, and I wouldn't lay it all on LayerZero, although I do agree that the default setup that's kind of out of the box for people to use is probably not great, and I think it's something like 40% of people do tend to use that setup, and so they're saying it's mainly the fault of Kelp DAO for not sort of modifying that and going further. But I think there's some truth in that. Obviously, there's 60% of people, including Euler and all these other projects, that decided to use more DVNs. But yeah, certainly there's some blame across all parties here, I would say.
Chris, you've been in this space for a while. You've both had to invest in projects, evaluate projects, invest like trading setups, like evaluate those. What do you make of this hack? What does this say to you about where DeFi is?
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of challenges right now in the space. And again, what have we lost? Like 600 million in this month alone. I'm not the type of guy who's going to point fingers at LayerZero or Kelp DAO. Let's point fingers at the people that really deserve it. And that's the criminals that perpetrated this attack, right? And what have we done? We continue to allow people to operate and attack our protocols without an all-government response. I think it's unacceptable. I've been talking about this forever, but like, why are we blaming the victims again? Yes, could they have been stronger? Absolutely. Yes, it's a very harsh environment. But when I'm walking down the street with my wallet and someone steals it from me, those are the persons that need to be held accountable. So like, I think everyone's going to point fingers, this and that, but why are we letting these threat actors destroy and impede our protocols? Like, I think it's unacceptable. I think we need a whole government response. I think we need to take action and clarity, and it's completely unacceptable. We cannot tolerate this. We want innovation in this country, but then we need accountability when people try to attack it. We need to put them on defense. Anyway,
you guys see Mythos? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, look, Mythos is both an opportunity and a threat, right? Someone's cat is very excited right now, but look, as AI comes into effect, it's going to provide brand new threat vectors, ones we've never heard of, but we have to be in front of that as well. So, look, I think it's going to take a while for confidence to be restored. What investors care about? Investors will take market risk all day long. What they won't take is operational risk and cyber risk, and so we got to be very, very careful.
So, Chris, I'll ask you this as we look at clarity, and I know it's a topic that you've had things to think about before. And Ram, Michael, feel free to pile on here. One part of this is clearly like privateering in your case. That is to say, when these assets are stolen, deputizing people to go after them, get them back, and return them in a way that is now legal. But secondarily to that, what other fixes do we need in the ecosystem right now? And, one of the things I observe is security in spaces like this have been a traditional tragedy of the commons type problem. That is to say, it needs to be done for everybody. but individually, many people don't have the incentive to spend on it if their competitors are not also spending on it. How do we get to a point where greatly hardening these systems and responding quickly is also the norm?
Let me just add one other thing. The one thing that was pretty good here was that Kelp DAO was able to take action within 46 minutes. That's an eternity, actually. But what we talk about all the time here is latency matters. At least they were able to prevent incremental, other incremental $100 to $200 million of being stolen. So I think that is everything when you're dealing with security comes down to latency. So to Ram's point, we need to be much more aggressive with agentic activity, agentic defense. And frankly, we need to be much more on offense. I've been talking about this from day one. We need to have our private sector supporting the security of our infrastructure.
Yeah, let me layer on here. Last week we talked about Mythos AI. I did some more homework on it. It is really quite remarkable. So Mythos from Anthropic was able to identify security vulnerabilities in BSD Linux, which has been battle tested out there for decades. And so a lot of these Fortune 50 companies are using Mythos to identify security vulnerabilities and protect against that. The point is that these nation state capabilities will be in the hands of corporates and then individuals within 1 to 2 years because of the democratization of AI. So it's a significant thing. It's a disappointing setback. DeFi is what, like 6-7 years old now? You're still getting these hacks. It's hard to have confidence in the system when that happens. I think people are going to stick in the capital markets world and the ETF world because they value security first. I do think, yes, like hold governments accountable, but what are we going to do in North Korea? They already have sanctions. They're already a pariah of the international system. It's hard to find what the marginal response is.
Yeah, I think.
But this is not North Korea, right? This is not North Korea. It's Lazarus Group, right?
Well,
Why did I say that?
I mean,
it's a criminal Listen, it's a criminal organization. We wouldn't attack its nation state.
Are they directly connected to the DPRK though?
I know.
Aren't they essentially an arm of the DPRK?
Of course they are. But I'm saying is DPRK has to have plausible deniability because they're a nation state. We need to shut down Lazarus Group. Bottom line.
I think part is, I'll be real quick. One is fight AI with AI is one, like of course, but we need this technology. We need it yesterday, and it's not surety. The second is how do you create surety? Can use other technologies and insurance and reserve pools. In insurance market, we have reinsurance, for example. There's a Berkshire Hathaway. They would collect a fee for providing that insurance. How do they underwrite it? They perform their own security assessment. They, just like a ratings agency, they'd rate it, they'd assess the protocol, they stand behind it, collect a fee for that. That's a free market response to this, and that can instill confidence and trust.
Michael, we should talk about this. So, in derivatives, we have guarantee funds, right? Where we have socialized losses in case of extreme tail risks. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe we should start having these pooled type solutions to your point. So it's a take on insurance, but it's a market-driven socialized risk approach.
So a few points just going back. I mean, I think finding Lazarus is very, very difficult. You've got some fantastic people out there. I've worked with law enforcement before. I mean, there are people out there really trying. It's just a really tough challenge. And the other thing is in DeFi, there's nowhere to hide, right? In the years gone by, it always used to be a smart contract exploit. My early years in DeFi back in 2020 and sort of up to 2023, it was all smart contracts because they're out there public, and that's something to be celebrated because it means that everybody can verify the code and exactly what it's doing. But it also leaves you with very little wiggle room. There's no margin forever. People are spending a tremendous amount of money. Euler, we spent millions and millions of dollars on security, but there is really just no room forever whatsoever. You do tend to get, one of the arguments I used to make about DeFi was that you would get kind of anti-fragility emerging from protocols that had vulnerabilities would be exploited and would kind of fall away, and the ones that remained would get this so-called Lindy effect, and they'd be the ones that you knew weren't exploitable because their code's right there and they've held billions of dollars and they can't be exploited. I think this kind of attack was quite different, and the kinds of attacks that we're seeing now are quite different. A lot of them are kind of key leaks, so people losing access to their private keys or sort of like leaking infrastructure. And then this one was more sort of infrastructure level as well. It was a very, very wouldn't say an entirely different class. It's nothing too novel, but the way it's being carried out now, it's not all at the smart contract level. I think we're actually seeing quite a hardening of protocols. On AI, AI is a great tool, but it's an arms race, right? It can be used by the good guys and the bad guys. I think teams need to be using it much more and auditing end to end, absolutely everything using AI, and getting their hands on the best possible tools. I think you see a lot of security firms are working to bring these tools out now, and increasingly teams are using this, but it's also in the hands of the bad guys, and it's they're very, very effective operators, and it's speeding up their ability to attack things as well. And then, yeah, the last point on the pooled model and insurance and all the rest of it. One thing I sort of said to somebody today on social media was a lot of the mechanisms and a lot of mechanisms we have in DeFi today are kind of legacy from a period where you weren't really allowed to introduce centralizing elements into the systems. So people have been asking, why are there not more monitoring systems and pause functionality and more control effectively? And part of that comes from this, regulatory stance from the past where you had to be fully decentralized, have zero control, because any amount of control you did have would lead to persecution by the regulators. So as that stance has sort of softened and changed, I do think we'll start to see quite a big difference in how protocols are built up now, and the level of the kind of systems they have in place to firstly prevent attacks, and then if an attack has happened, as you said, then how do you actually go about the process of socializing that? Who organizes that? Who's in charge? I think now it's hopefully going to be easier for teams to actually step up and say, no, here's the system, here's how it'll work, we're in charge, we'll do this.
I think you could have I'm going to jump in. I think you could have decentralized socialization of risk. I honestly do. And the way that it would work would be you create a pool, and I think most of the perps dexes should do this too, because I hate this concept of ADL in the beginning. It should be at the end. But essentially, you create a pool, and the pool members benefit from the yield of the protocol, or they benefit from the revenue of the protocol, however that protocol may work. A pool is created. You can flex the pool. You can make it bigger with higher yield. You can make it smaller with little yield. And if there are certain, A equals B, if there is a hack, boom, that's the pool that becomes at risk. And provided that that's fully transparent, I think theoretically, it's very, very possible. But we just haven't seen that yet. Really, we've seen nuances about it, but not really anything codified or anything hardened.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting here to me is people start speaking about insurance for these protocols. Is insurance comes along with underwriting, and it comes along with restrictions, right? And I'll tell you right in the current day, if you look at what most insurance or reinsurance companies would charge you for DeFi, you're not going to like the quotes. And I think that is, I think that is an, well, I mean, there are people who will give them to you, but I've seen the prices and they're an accurate reflection of risk, right? Yeah. Like, how do you feel about a 30% per annum premium, right? Like, oh, well, why are you even buying something at that point? But the reality is, Chris, is an extension of what you were saying, whether it's decentralized or centralized. The nice part about insurance pricing is it's going to be pretty functional and experience rated. There are structural upgrades we need to start making to crypto, because we have to start, and I think this feeds into the point that, Michael, you were making earlier about working in legacy frameworks. The belief that transactions are, call it, optimistically correct, has to be discarded in this environment. We are clearly getting enough hacks that all large transactions should probably be viewed with some degree of skepticism. And I don't know if that means delays withdrawing from protocols, choke points on bridges, needing significantly larger shares of votes to move assets. Like, there are many ways to do that. And not all of them are implicated by having one centralized party that controls things. But I would say, without a multiply redundant risk framework, I have a lot of doubts that we can solve that problem. And the reason I say that is, as you look at the sophistication of some of these attacks, again, we're talking about poisoning a bunch of RPC nodes. At the same time, we're doing a DDoS attack. At the same time, we've compromised. This is not trivial stuff to defend against. If we're saying it's nation state actors with their tremendous resources against individual protocols, the protocols will lose with certainty. However, you can still flip that security framework on its head if we make it a chain of things that have to fail with a redundant response across the ecosystem. Because the Lazarus Group breaking a single protocol is relatively easy, but breaking 8 protocols simultaneously, all of which work differently, becomes so complex that if they're capable of doing that, essentially the chain is unusable at that point. And so I would say DeFi, if you're thinking about how to get insurance and how to build things, has to stop operating from the framework of we assume transactions are legitimate. That has been my major takeaway of the past few hacks in a row, of just like starting all the way back with Bybit and then another partial interdiction, which was the Cetus hack. We just had Kelp DAO here. We've had like attack after attack after attack. And to me, it raises the question, and I'm curious, for the rest of the group, do we have to change our default thought model of transactions are legitimate? If you like this segment, please like, subscribe, and tune in every Monday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Austin Campbell, the host of Bips and Bips, along with my friends Ram Ahluwalia and Chris Perkins and our slate of exceptional guests. Every week, we're going to discuss macro, crypto, and the collision of worlds, covering topics that move markets and shape the financial landscape.
If you've been loving Bits and Bips, don't forget that the show is transitioning to its own feeds on X, YouTube, and your favorite podcast player. If you're not already subscribed to Bits and Bips on its own channels, go there now and hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with our twice-weekly live streams and macro meets crypto breakdowns. Bits and Bips will only be on the Unchained feed for a few more weeks, so subscribe today to be ready for launch. You can get all the links at unchainedcrypto.com/bitsandbips.